Добрий день, я вітаю.
Good afternoon. I greet everybody who joined us. Ukraine National Agency Ukraine Forum continues its operation. It's the day 236 of the Russian aggression in Ukraine, and since this morning we can see that the Russian occupants don't stop shelling different regions of Ukraine. Now let's talk about the situation in the Donetsk region. We have Oleksandra Havrylko live. She's the press officer of the National Police in the Donetsk region. Miss Oleksandra, hello. Good afternoon. What's the situation in the Donetsk region as of now? What did we have within last night and what we have for the morning? Within the last 24 hours, 18 settlements were shelled. Part of them are being shelled on a daily basis. They include Bakhmut, Avdiivka, Maryanka district, Kramatorsk district. Also, today we had Slovyansk, Ocheretina, Orlivka, and Tonenka shelled. A lot of different small settlements which were shelled within the last night and day. A number of locals were injured, some perished. Many infrastructure objects and civilian dwellings were damaged. As you see from our daily reports, Donetsk is under massive shellings on a day-to-day basis. And every day we have injured among the civilians. How many casualties among the civilians do we have within the last 24 hours? We don't comment, the police doesn't comment about the number of civil casualties. It's the job of military administration. I cannot tell you the figures, but for what I know, we have one child injured. Miss Oleksandra, we know that now in the deoccupied Lyman, the exhumation is in progress, the exhumation of the bodies of the people tortured to death. If you have some information available, can you please provide us on the number of victims? What results of the exhumation do we have for the time being? Now we have information about 43 mass graves. We can divide them into mass graves like in Lyman, where there were 2 locations with the bodies of both civilians and military buried. Also, we have information of the people buried in the land plots, in the yards of the buildings. It may be a mass grave or individual grave, like from 2 to 10 people, but the biggest grave site is in Lyman. So for the time being, we have information about 43 such burial sites. The work is still in progress in Lyman, specifically in locations where we exhumate bodies of the military and civilians as well. The forensic specialists work on the sites of the military burials. For the time being, the work is still in progress on the burial site with the civil victims. We have approximately 40 graves there, because there are some sites where the investigators can't define the exact number of victims on the burial sites, because we cannot say if there are bodies in the graves or there are none. Within the last 24 hours, we had about 10 to 14, 15 bodies exhumated. So within the last 24 hours, we exhumated 12 bodies. Ms. Oleksandra, talking about what experts say about the bodies that were examined, what are the main causes of injuries, causes of death, or we can say that people died due to the shellings, or was it intentional homicide by the occupants? Mostly the injuries show that they were casualties of the mass shellings. We have certain information about a number of victims who died from fire shots, who died with violent death. I cannot tell you the exact number because we had biological materials sampled, and we're expecting for the results of the investigation that we can say for sure that people were shot to death by the Russian occupants, and we will formally promulgate those figures. For the time being, I can only say that there is a number of victims with fire shot wounds, but we will talk about the exact number later. For example, today we had a case when people reported a site where Russian occupants were stationed. It was abandoned, and a man's body was found there. The territory around the site was mined, and the preliminary information that we have is that the body of a civilian man was mined too. We had the mining team working on site along with the investigators, and the body was brought to the morgue. It will be examined, and the preliminary information is that the person was executed, but we can say for sure only upon the formal investigation is over. Oleksandra, we have the information that police identified the sites of tortures. How many sites are identified for the time being? We have such information about the torture sites in Svetohirsk, but I cannot give you the details because I know that the investigation is in progress there, and the security service in Ukraine is in charge of the investigation. Do we have such sites identified in Lyman as well? No, I don't have such information about Lyman. I have the information of this kind about one torture site in Svetohirsk. If we have time, I will tell you the figures that I have in my disposal at the moment. I apologize, I don't have the exact figures of the torture victims. Now, we had this information in police. The security service of Ukraine is now in charge of identifying the witness and all the investigative actions. But we don't have any information of this kind about Lyman. Oleksandra, talking about the humanitarian situation in Lyman in general, what is it? What do people say? What do you see? Situation in all the occupied territories is more or less the same. Now all the services, starting from police, Donetsk military administration, everybody does a lot of work to get people back to normal life. The key issues today is supporting people with humanitarian aid, generally everybody who visited Lyman for the time being. During occupation, upon the occupation, everything that people ask for is humanitarian aid and just simple food. They ask for food. Our main goal is to accompany the humanitarian aid convoys. We have volunteers and different organizations contacting the police administration. Some of them go to military administration, some of them contact police administration, and they offer all the aid, all the help available. So they offer police to accompany this humanitarian aid, so they could deliver it to Svetogirsk, Lyman, and other smaller settlements where the people still live. Not much of them, but there still are in those settlements. We had a minor humanitarian convoy in Lyman later, the United Nations mission. We were getting the meal sets there. They were delivered to the elderly people, to the children. We see a lot of volunteers working there, dispensing humanitarian aid, including meals, toiletries. We even have the information coming from the police management that these organizations, they provide building materials, construction materials, where people refuse to evacuate from the areas. So police will help them to fix their buildings in a way that people could spend winter in there. So our main task is to support the people. What I'm commenting now is the general situation. A big part of job is being done by Donetsk military administration, along with the local authorities, who take care of delivering humanitarian aid to the people. And we, as the police, we help to deliver the convoy and to dispense the humanitarian aid. And concerning the operation of the police units in those areas, the majority, the number of people is increasing who understand that police is working in the city. People come across police cars patrolling the area. They stop them, telling them about their problems. We start to reestablish signal connection and communication within the district. In more details, the information in more details can be obtained from the military administration as to communicate. When there was no communication, people were coming to the police units and asking to help them with the communication. Now that the communication is reestablished, I think we will have more people contacting the police via the normal channels. We have the police station reestablished in Svetogirsk. We have police personnel there operating 24/7. Dear colleagues, your questions? Olha Panasenko, Ukrinform. Can you tell us, please? In the view of a difficult humanitarian situation and shelling of the occupied territories by the Russian occupants, people from the occupied settlements, do they try to leave for safer areas of Ukraine, or do they try coming back? Do those who left earlier, do they try coming back? Thank you. A part of the people is still interested in evacuation, and step by step we work on those issues. In Lyman, in Svetohirsk, we work on those issues. We had about 24,000 population in Lyman before occupation. According to the last calculation, we had a little bit more than 2,000 people. We dispensed the information cards about the evacuation. When I was in Lyman together with our police units, people pick up the cards, they ask what does the government provide. They tell about their condition, for example, that their house was destroyed and it's difficult to survive. That's why they show interest and they plan their departure. They take telephone numbers, they take the contacts. However, there is a part of people who say that finally, no matter how difficult it will be, we will stay here, we will stay in the occupied areas in Lyman and Svetohirsk. But as to the question of people coming back to those areas, I don't observe such a trend. Maybe as the winter will be over, now there's a huge percentage of infrastructure and civilian buildings damaged. Some of the residential areas are completely destroyed to the ground, so it's impossible to live there. We call for people to leave the area. People sort of come around after all the horrors they survived. Maybe they will show more interest in evacuation. Another question, please. Hello? Yeah.
I would like to ask if you found just a single graves in Lyman, or it was a massive graves, and how many civilians did you find there, and how many Ukrainian soldiers you found there? And also, did you notice any traces of tortures on the bodies? So 3 questions in one. Thank you very much.
As I mentioned, there were 34 Ukrainian servicemen exhumated in the mass grave site in Lyman. Also, within the last 24 hours, we exhumated a body of another serviceman, but it was a separate grave, not from the mass grave site. It was in the town itself. So we have 35 servicemen in general. As to the civilians, we have 152 people exhumated in the mass grave sites, both in mass graves in Lyman and from individual graves as well. So 152 civilians in total. These are the most recent numbers that I have. But now that we're talking, the number of such victims, the investigators are getting more information about such victims, so the number of victims is increasing day by day. The investigators work in the burial site, and people know about them, and they contact every day. They come every day. They come to the investigators, and among them there are relatives who say, for example, that we have our daughter or our sister buried here. They provide any help. In case of necessities, they consent to sampling of biological materials. For example, when we exhumate the body and we cannot identify a person, we take biological samples from the victim, as well as biological samples of their relatives who show up, who let us know about their existence. We do the comparative investigation. For the time being, for example, we have 88 biological samples sent for examination, and now part of the body, the identification of the part of the bodies is in progress. As to the tortures, I cannot disclose the number of such victims who were tortured to death until I have the results of the investigation officially divulged. But the majority of these people were those who died due to explosions. Because we have to understand that there is a number of people who died of violent death, who were killed by Russian occupants, but part of the people died due to the shellings, and there is also a part of the people who died naturally. Another question, if I may, how many people are left in Lyman now? According to our calculations, we have a little bit more. One, two, Oleksandra. Our connection is interrupted. I will remind that we had the information of a little bit more than 2,000 people still residing in Lyman. I want to thank everybody. I want to thank our speaker. Unfortunately, the communication was interrupted. We understand that the communication in the Donetsk region is not perfect, so we have taken into account these issues. Thanks, dear colleagues. We will have our next briefing within the next 10 minutes. Evgenia Kramchuk, the deputy chair of the Verkhovna Rada Humanitarian Information Policy Committee, and we will talk about the establishment of the Special International Court for Crime of Russian Aggression. Stay with us. Work for the victor.